If there's one place in America that could most vividly illustrate the shape of hell, it would be Florida.
Beaches to parks to sidewalks, even under bridges. This is home for some people in South Florida.
I think it's a horrible law. I think it's very dehumanizing.
It's not a crime. It's just unfortunate that I'm homeless.
A Floridian boy, and there's no place for me here.
Once dubbed the retirement paradise of America, Florida was where millions placed their dreams of peaceful twilight years. But that dreamlike vision is now a story of the past. Florida today is no longer the promised land. It is gradually becoming the final refuge of dreams that have rotted in silence. Outside, the resorts are still lit up. Tourists are still sunbathing, enjoying lavish dinners, and sipping wine by the beach as if everything is still perfect. But just a few blocks away, hundreds of people are sleeping rough on the sidewalks, huddled in cars, or taking shelter under bridges. This is not just the story of the homeless, but a warning for an America changing course, where just a small incident can push anyone to the margins, becoming invisible in the very city they once called home. In this documentary, we will, together, step into two parallel worlds right in Florida. On one side is paradise with luxury hotels, $500 meals, and international events. On the other side is hell, where the American dream rots little by little in the weary gaze of forgotten residents, making even the security forces dare not step in. As usual, this is not a pessimistic warning, but a perspective reflecting multiple sources to help the community understand better and prepare proactively. Are you ready to explore the dark side of the most vibrant and luxurious city in America? Let's start right now. In the 1980s, Florida was the ideal destination for retirees. They sold their homes in Ohio, Michigan, New York to exchange for a small nest in Sarasota, Fort Myers, or Naples, where the lawns were neatly trimmed, palm trees swayed, and the neighbors were warmly friendly. Everything seems to be calculated to grant those who have dedicated their entire lives a deserving ending. However, that dream is gradually being eroded by cold policy decisions, by the prioritization of development at all costs, and by an economy that increasingly values external appearances over the happiness of local residents. Florida welcomes investors, real estate corporations, and billionaires building resorts by the beach, but forgets the people who laid the first foundations for this state. The ordinary citizens living on pensions and faith. When affordable housing is demolished to make way for hotels, when no one cares about controlling rental prices, when tax money is not reinvested in healthcare and welfare, those who once believed in the dream are starting to be pushed out onto the streets. The 72-year-old woman, who used to be a school secretary. After her husband left, she couldn't afford the doubled house insurance for 3 years. Without children, without the strength to start over, she lived in an old pickup truck in the Walmart parking lot, eating dry cereal and crumbs of bread, and spent the whole day praying that tonight wouldn't be too cold. She shared, "I never expected my life to end up like this. My American dream has gone with my husband." The streets that were once symbols of tranquility have now become places where people pitch tents. The rows of coconut trees are no longer enough to provide shade for those sleeping rough beneath them. The American dream, once vibrant here, is gradually fading right before our eyes. When a state once likened to an ideal retirement destination suddenly becomes a hotspot for the homelessness crisis, can the hope for a peaceful old age still be something we can reach? Or is it just a beautiful dream, something people dare only to think of in their dreams? Right in the heart of sunny Florida, amidst the sprawling white beaches and glamorous resorts, dark patches are silently spreading beneath the glossy veneer of America's retirement paradise. Tourists come here to rest and enjoy. But if they pause for a moment, veering into the unnamed streets off the tourist map, they will encounter a reality no one is ready to face. An underground ecosystem of the invisible, living, breathing, and existing amidst trash, despair, and oblivion. Florida currently has more than 31,000 people without stable housing. Many people still believe that homelessness is the result of laziness. But here, the cause is simpler and more brutal. Rent has far exceeded people's ability to live. Support policies have not kept pace with the new reality, and anyone, even those with jobs, can be pushed out onto the streets. Angelia Woods is a heartbreaking example. Once a senior accountant at the Florida Department of Transportation, Angelia had a stable job that many people dream of. However, after the pandemic, she lost her job, was evicted from her home, and then couldn't catch up when rent prices skyrocketed.
How is an accountant homeless?
And that's what people wonder, because you have to pay to live, and so therefore you can't afford to save any money to move.
Now, Angelia lives with her 4 children in a makeshift hotel room costing nearly $2,000 a month. Almost all of her income goes into that. She's not poor enough to qualify for assistance, but not able to afford rent or a deposit for a new place. Angelia is a living testament to a growing reality. Homelessness is no longer an issue for losers. It has become a shadow lurking over the middle class. Those who work, pay taxes, and once thought they were safe. At the foot of the elevated highways, on the outskirts of bustling shopping centres, tent cities are springing up every day. And there are areas even the police choose to avoid, not because they are indifferent, but because they know their despair has surpassed the limits that power can control. While the city continues to pour billions of dollars into promoting tourism, organising festivals, and attracting international investment, the budget for shelters, mental health services, and affordable housing is either being cut or frozen in pending budget reviews. They clean up homeless camps before international events, just like one sweeps the front porch to welcome guests. The problem is not solved. It is merely hidden under a facade of emptiness. Florida and other cities across the United States are creating a layer of people pushed to the margins, not just materially, but also in social perception. They are no longer part of the main story. They have no role in the growth picture. And so, they gradually become invisible in the eyes of the community and society. When every city is engulfed by such darkness, is there still a place that can be called a livable paradise? They call Miami a paradise. And indeed, from above, this city is breathtakingly beautiful. But if you look down at the street corners instead of looking up at the skyscrapers, you will discover a Miami you are not familiar with, where tents are set up in parking lots, people huddle next to trash bags, and the wailing of hungry children can be heard. This is Miami, a paradise on the edge of hell. Nowhere else is the social divide more starkly exposed than in Miami. This is a city that hosts international investment conferences, luxurious fashion weeks, where you can spend $500 on a dinner overlooking the sea. But it is also here that the homeless rate increases steadily each year. In just the downtown and overtown areas, nearly 9,000 people live without fixed housing. And in some areas, even the police force admits they avoid patrolling unless absolutely necessary, because the level of danger there has exceeded their control. The frightening thing is that this is not the result of sudden poverty, but of a policy that deliberately prioritizes image over people. Miami has spent millions to renovate facades, beautify tourist areas, and host international events, but has gradually cut funding for social housing, mental health support, and especially programs for relocating the homeless. When they clean up the tent areas, they don't reintegrate the people. They just force them out of sight.
Well, in Miami per se, there's support only for those who are favored. Meaning that, okay, Miami is all about, you know what I'm saying, the money you got or who you know.
The authorities call it an urban order solution. But those who live in tents know well that it is just a silent erasure when human value is measured by the money they have. A city cannot be called civilized if it allows an old soldier to sleep on the sidewalk, while tax money is used to promote a polished image to the world. The beauty of Miami, if built only on layers of makeup and forgetfulness, will soon become a hollow, desolate, and haunting beauty. Is Florida still a resort in a beautiful place? Or is it just skimming over despair, cleverly hidden under the sun? You might be working full-time, debt-free, not indulging in luxury shopping, but still can't make ends meet in Florida. That is the reality happening every day under each utility bill, each paycheck that can't keep up with the skyrocketing rent prices in this retirement paradise. Florida used to be a promised land for those who wanted to retire with modest savings or start over with a decent salary. A place where the cost of living is lower than in the northern states. But that dream is now slowly shattering. A one-bedroom apartment in Tampa now rents for over $2,200 a month, nearly 3 times what it was a decade ago. In Miami, that number even exceeds $2,700, just for a temporary shelter. Meanwhile, the median salary in Florida remains stuck around $45,000 a year. Workers are forced to spend nearly all of their income just to pay rent. An impossible equation to balance, especially for those living on social benefits, those who no longer have the strength to work overtime, nor the opportunity to start over. Every week, hundreds of families are evicted from their rental homes because they can no longer afford to pay, simply because everything has gone up except their income. While the people are struggling, real estate investors are flocking in like bees to honey. They buy up entire blocks of apartments, then rent them out at exorbitant prices. 1 apartment, 2 apartments, then the whole building, all became money-making tools for a small group and a survival nightmare for the rest. The state government is once again standing by. Florida does not have a rent control policy. There are no limits on sudden price increases. There are no regulations requiring large investors to allocate a percentage of housing for low-income individuals. Everything is left to the market, a market that increasingly only serves the rich. If you think you're lucky because you haven't been affected yet, try to imagine the future. Your children, your grandchildren. Will they be able to afford to rent an apartment to start their careers? Can a single mother working 60 hours a week save enough to get her child out of a makeshift tent in a Walmart parking lot? We can't just call this inflation. This is an existential crisis, where the cost of living not only drains wallets, but also erodes the belief that if you work hard, you will have a home, a decent life. And if that is no longer true, does the American dream still exist? In a country that once prided itself on abundant food, it's hard to imagine that the day would come when a hot meal would become a luxury. Yet right in the heart of Florida, one of the wealthiest states in America, thousands of people line up every day, quietly, patiently. Not to receive a lavish meal, but just hoping for a box of cold noodles, a slice of white bread, or an expired can of beans. And sometimes, even their turn is not guaranteed. That scene takes place in many places. Outside supermarket, parking lots, in front of churches, in forgotten parks. The elderly, children, veterans, single mothers, all lined up, not for free food, but because they have no other choice. Florida, one of the wealthiest states in the United States, is witnessing the gradual disappearance of full meals. According to statistics from Feeding Tampa Bay, one of the branches of the Feeding Florida network, 1 in 6 adults is facing food insecurity. Among them, it is even more unfortunate that 1 in 7 seniors have to choose between paying for food, rent, or medication. Those numbers are not the result of a storm or a drought, but rather the clear outcome of a series of misguided policy choices. Food inflation over the past 3 years has pushed the prices of meat, eggs, vegetables and milk to their highest levels in 2 decades. Meanwhile, food assistance programs like SNAP, food stamps, have been cut or their scope reduced. Local food banks, once a lifeline during the pandemic, are now overwhelmed both financially and in terms of manpower. But amidst the charts and graphs of rising prices, there are specific faces withering away each day. The 64-year-old man is a retired power worker due to a work-related accident. With a modest pension, he lives frugally, managing in every way possible, but still can't keep up with the skyrocketing prices. 3 times a week, he rides his bike nearly 10 kilometers to a food distribution center in Tampa. Last week, when he arrived, he was informed that they had run out of meals for the day. He shared, "I never thought. Throughout my lifetime, there came a day when a decent meal became such a luxury privilege. We have become too accustomed to the image of Florida as a land of sunshine, fresh fruits, and fertile farms. But that image no longer reflects reality. Because even in the towns that once supplied food for the entire country, the farmers, pickers, and packers have now become the first to go hungry. When a society can no longer ensure a decent meal for the elderly, for children, for the sick, then the issue is no longer about a lack of budget, but a lack of kindness and sincerity. Because a system that chooses to spend money on fireworks rather than hot soup, that prioritizes investor incentives over food aid, is a system that is gradually losing its reason for existence. You can drive through clean streets and not see scenes of poverty, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means we have built fences high enough so we don't have to look down. When a hot meal becomes a luxury, what is becoming normal in this society? There are workers who wake up at 5 a.m., wear uniforms, arrive on time, complete their tasks, do not shirk their responsibilities, and pay their taxes in full. They are not the lazy social parasites that outdated prejudices use to claim. They are servers, delivery drivers, hospital janitors, warehouse workers, supermarket cashiers, the people who keep Florida's machine running. However, after their shifts end, they don't go home. They return to the parking lot, return to the old car with curtains drawn tight, returning to an underpass or a tent by the roadside. They are the new group in the homeless class, those who work full-time but still can't afford a roof over their heads to sleep under. Working no longer means stability. That is the harsh reality that is gradually becoming normal. The cause does not lie in a lack of effort, but in the complete breakdown between the value of labor and the cost of living. A full-time worker earning minimum wage in Florida would have to work over 80 hours a week just to afford rent for a 1-bedroom apartment at market price. And even with a better salary, if you have to spend 70% of your income just to have a place to sleep, it's nearly double the amount the state recommends you should spend on housing costs. The current system is facing many challenges in fully meeting the needs of freelance workers, such as delivery drivers, hourly cleaners, or temporary staff. They are hard-working individuals who contribute to the daily rhythm of society, but they often fall outside the scope of traditional policy support, from labor welfare to housing programs. Many of them are struggling day by day, but still have to live in temporary, precarious conditions, not due to a lack of effort, but because current policies have not yet adapted to the new ways of working in this era. We are witnessing a reality. More and more Americans are working hard, but still struggling to find stability. And it's not just a story about housing. It's also the big question of whether effort is still enough to achieve a safe life and a place to call home. Isn't it true that what people fear the most is not losing their home, but losing hope, losing faith, and ultimately losing the reason to keep trying? When meals become scarce and jobs are no longer enough to pay the rent, people are left with only a faint hope. Subsidies, a small portion of support from the government, not to live comfortably, but just to keep them from falling into the abyss. But even that lifeline is now fraying and breaking strand by strand. The Florida Policy Institute has published several reports related to the proposed federal budget cuts. The proposed cuts could affect programs like Medicaid, SNAP, and federal housing assistance, which could lead to millions of Floridians losing access to these essential services. The reasons given sound reasonable: the need to balance the budget, encourage self-reliance, reallocate resources more efficiently. But amidst those economic terms, sometimes we forget one very simple thing. People cannot stand up after a fall if there is nothing solid enough to hold on to. The issue here is not just about financial cuts, but rather cutting away a minimum guarantee that society once promised to the vulnerable. A civilized nation is not judged by the number of golf courses or skyscrapers, but by how they treat the elderly, the sick, and those unable to work. The Florida government, with a tax system praised as investor-friendly because it does not impose a personal income tax, has gradually depleted the budget for social welfare. When the economy fluctuates, the first thing to be cut are the programs that assist those without a strong political voice. We often pride ourselves on being a country that doesn't leave anyone behind. But if there is no support, no affordable housing, no medicine within reach, where will the elderly go? How will those who are unable to work survive? Where will those who have worked for 40 years end their lives? Is it possible that when society loses the ability to care for its weakest members, it is also a society that is gradually losing its very soul? Florida was once seen as the promised land, a place where people ended their working lives with leisurely afternoons on sunlit porches, where young people found opportunities to start anew, and where working families could settle down with reasonable expenses. But today, the future that millions once envisioned when they closed their eyes and thought of Florida is crumbling with each makeshift tent, each food distribution running out, each eviction decision hastily signed in budget meetings. If you ever believed that the homelessness crisis was just a temporary issue, merely a consequence of a few economic shocks, then take a look at the bigger picture. Florida is no longer a destination. It is gradually becoming a place to leave. Reports show that more and more young people, workers, and even the middle class are quietly leaving the state. It's not because they don't love this place. It's because they can no longer afford to survive here. This is a wake-up call. Because Florida is not just a state. It is a mirror reflecting America as the values that once held society together begin to crack. When housing is seen as a privilege rather than a basic right. When welfare is viewed as a burden rather than a responsibility. When the poor are blamed for the system instead of being protected from it. The most frightening thing is, all these things happening are not a sudden collapse. It is a silent process of disintegration, layer by layer, nook by nook, that we only realize when it's too late. Florida may still have sunshine. There will still be the sea. There will still be tourists coming, checking in, leaving with stunning photos. But beneath that veneer of glamour, a layer of Americans are living without knowing what tomorrow will bring. And worse, without knowing if there will even be a tomorrow. When darkness spreads from a state once called paradise, is there anywhere bright enough to guide the rest? Florida didn't collapse in a storm. It didn't collapse due to war or disease. But it gradually crumbled, silently, through each indifferent policy decision, each instance of inflation being neglected, each person being excluded from public discourse. The lost roofs, the missing meals, the citizens quietly disappearing from the system. All of these are not mere individual misfortunes, but clear manifestations of a society fracturing from within. We didn't make this video to offer a hasty solution, but if you feel something stirring within, a bit of sorrow, a bit of anger, a bit of doubt, then that's the starting point. Because change, no matter how small, always begins with facing the truth. What do you think about the homeless hell in Florida? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel and stay updated with our latest videos. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. This video is created for the purpose of analysis, exploration, and sparking community thought, based on public data, official sources, and true accounts. We do not represent any political organization or government agency, and we do not intend to incite, distort, or mislead. All content in the video aims to raise social awareness and open up a discussion space, not to replace legal advice or official data sources.